This is a show that brings to the forefront newsmakers, entertainers, and those making a difference in our lives and in our world. Each week is a new adventure with topics ranging from the most serious and cutting edge to the most lighthearted and entertaining.
This is Taking Care of Business with Richard Solomon.
Greetings, everyone. Richard Solomon, Taking Care of Business with a very serious show today. We're going to talk about suicide prevention in youth. Normally, we try to be fun and entertaining and provide all kinds of great information, but given all the things in the news that we see and what we hear and the tremendous increase in suicide over the years, we want to bring some information to the general public. First, if you have a pen, grab a phone number, 516-679-1111. That's the Long Island Crisis Center's hotline, 516-679-1111. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline. Please keep this number handy for you, friends, someone you know, anybody who is in crisis, 1-800-273-8255. I am joined today in the studio with two incredible experts. It's Elissa Smilowitz and Regina Barros-Rivera, and they're from the North Shore Family Guidance Center, North Shore Child and Family Guidance Center, right here in Roslyn. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right.
Good morning.
Right. So let's talk. This is serious and heavy stuff, so let's get right into it. Is there an epidemic of suicide and suicidal thoughts among youth in our country?
Well, right now it's the second leading cause of death for adolescents. There has been an increase of close to 37% in the past 10 years. So I would say that it is definitely on the radar in regards to mental health.
Are we doing a good enough job as society to look for warning signs and to see what's going on? Or are we just kind of like doing the ostrich thing, and then when these things happen and hit the news, we're all in shock and can't believe that has actually happened?
I think when dealing with youth, a lot of times parents think there's normal adolescence because adolescents could be moody, they have wide mood swings, and that's considered normal. And sometimes you might think your teenager is being dramatic, but there are very serious signs, and it requires not only the parent, but the school and maybe family members to identify what we call red flags might be. Our agency services children, youth, and families. So we specialize on the island with working with children ranging from the 0 to 24 and their families.
At what age should expressions of depression and suicide in youth be popping on your radar? Because obviously, even though you deal with children as young as 0, I don't know that they can't even talk at that age. So at what point, when you hear certain kinds of words or expressions from children, what age is it that you would become very serious or alarmed at some of the expressions they may say? And then what are those things that you have to look for, as opposed to, oh, that's just them being dramatic, versus, oh my goodness, this is something that I better make a phone call to?
Right. So we watch the behavior. Young children don't use language. They use play and they use behavior. So if you see withdrawal or aggressive behaviors, not eating, not sleeping, temper tantrums. So the little ones, because we do have an early childhood center, we have children that may become very impulsive. And then we want to know, is it because they're feeling depression because they're little and they could feel depression, but they act it out. With adolescents, you see their behavior change with change of friends, change of school, inability to concentrate, conflicts with parents, a sudden change in what you thought was a normal for them. If they were a good student, all of a sudden they're failing. You're starting to notice that their peers have changed, and you're concerned about it. So we do, you're looking at depression. They're not likely to tell you that they want to die, but they may start withdrawing. And a big factor that we see is the internet, their social
media definitely impacts them. The bullying that can go on in the old days you can escape it, you can go home, but with social media, it's always there. So that's a big concern with children that are being bullied. Also, children that are part of the LGBT community, they're a higher risk of suicide. And children that are also dabbling in substance abuse And at-risk behaviors, sometimes that's a sign that they're struggling emotionally.
Right, but I guess it's fairly common for depression to exist. Where there's more isolation now than there's ever been. I don't think social media is really social compared to maybe in prior generations where people actually lived in a neighborhood and they actually hung out with real live people and rode bicycles and did things. I think now you see much more sedentary and isolated lifestyle. Even when you just passing by a public park, you'll see kids sitting under a tree with like a tablet, as opposed to being on the monkey bars or the slide or the sprinkler, and so. Where does depression end, and where does the potential for suicide begin?
Well, with adolescents, they fluctuate. They could be fine for a while, and then they can go into these deep, dark thoughts. So that's why it's for adolescents, it's a higher risk because they are impulsive, and depending on where they're at emotionally, can impact their behaviors. So it becomes an issue when they're at that stage of life.
It's critical for the parent, if they see a change in behavior, an agency like ours, North Shore Child and Family Guidance Center, you can make a phone call, and for an emergency, we will see you within 24 to 48 hours if you're a parent that's afraid something's going on and that your child's at risk for hurting themselves. So what we are experts at doing is doing a good diagnostic differential diagnosis. What that means is if you have a history of depression in the family, if there's been a completed suicide in the family, if your child has had a major sudden loss and they're feeling sadness, and in your family, there's a pattern or a history where families have used suicide as a way out, your child is very high risk. So also if there's neurological impairment or differences, we know that. We go in and take a look if that's what's going on, if they need psychiatric evaluation, and if medication is indicated, that could immediately give you a help so that then our therapies can help, the talk therapy or children's specialized therapy, which it's a point we could discuss, but it's really working with the child and understanding who they are, what's going on in that moment, understanding their history, their patterns of relating, and what we think are the risk factors for them. And that we could do immediately, like within, right?
Yeah, the assessment is for the entire family. We want to know, how they function as a family, any conflicts, any stressors that the child and the family are experiencing is going to impact the child. If they don't feel safe, sometimes children will go to the extreme. Another thing that parents should be aware of, sometimes adolescents, they don't share with the parents when they're feeling suicidal. So they might tell a school social worker, they might tell a friend. Parents, if they hear that their child is expressing that, they shouldn't take it lightly, and they should go for an assessment to find out what's truly going on.
Okay. How do you make an assessment without further provoking the child or getting them to cover their tracks, so to camouflage what's really going on?
Well, what we try to do is, first of all, when we bring the child in, if they're, we try to engage them and get them to feel comfortable talking to us. And we have found that children that feel comfortable will share that they're feeling suicidal because they're afraid to tell their parents because they don't want to upset them, they don't want them to be angry. So a lot of times, by the time the child tells us, it's a relief. It's like, okay, I told somebody. And then what we do is we reassure them and tell them, I'm so glad you told me, and this is what we could do to try to help you. So we put it in a context of, okay, this is something that we need to deal with, and we're going to deal with it. And it's very comforting for the child.
In terms of children versus adults, especially older adults, do children really understand, number one, the significance of actually committing suicide, what that really means, as opposed to sort of just a vague thought? And do children actually have the understandings of the mechanisms to actually really carry it out, as opposed to doing a botched sort of job and only making it worse for themselves?
All right, so now, if we say children, I'm going to speak about, let's talk about a 12-year-old to an 18-year-old.
Right.
Let me go into that age. They think they're invincible. They feel their feelings very strongly. And usually, again, I say there's differences here because there's self-harming behaviors that are another category. It doesn't mean if a child is cutting, because there's a lot of self-harming that's going on, that they're making a suicidal attempt. The child or the adolescent, when they decide that they want to do something to hurt themselves and to end their life, they may do it impulsively in a moment of rage. And that the research shows completed suicides usually come when something happens between them and maybe the parent, and they're afraid that the outcome is worse than taking their life. And there's a period of time between that moment and their action, and that action is quick. It's different from the adult that may be in a deep depression where they're thinking about killing themselves. There are some adolescents that are in that category, but usually, and the research shows, your completed suicide is something happened, they feel that something worse is going to happen, and they better take their life. And that's where we have that. We know that. So we work with them in treatment to say there's nothing that bad that you have to end your life. Ending a life is ending a life. They don't really get that. Adolescents don't have that history of knowing life can be really wonderful and we could work together and life can change. Life can change a lot for you and we can help make that happen. If you could give that child that moment in your family session, it's a home run.
So how do you inspire people who feel hopelessness? How do you actually give them that ray of light?
Well, what we try to do is we try to engage them in a way where they're feeling supported. But we also work on, okay, so what can we do to keep you safe? So at this time, we can try to work with you and try to get you in a better place. We make sure that the child understands, we do a safety plan, so we make sure, the parents are on board. Sometimes that's tough. Kids don't always want to tell the parents, but, we have to. So we work very closely with the child separately and sometimes with the parents separately because sometimes the parents are in total shock that they're hearing this, and
I can
we
see
want to.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
Yeah, and I didn't know, and it's not uncommon. So we try to help the parent with some psychoeducation about it to help them understand that the child's asking for help, and we're going to help them. We in the guidance center we have a triage program where we do a lot of work with coping skills. We teach the adolescent how to learn how to regulate their emotions, learning how to distract from the negative thoughts. We work with the parents. We have parent groups to help the parent understand what the child is going through, offering the child more support. Monitoring the child and in a way where, the child feels supported and safe. And sometimes it's psychiatric, sometimes not. It really depends on the environmental stressors like family conflicts or a breakup with a boyfriend or fear of failure. A lot of high school students that have some of that perfectionist tendencies, they're not doing as well as they would like. So we have to try to help them regulate those feelings.
To what extent can you really change the environment for kids? Let's face it, you can give them hope and support, but if the actual stressor, whatever that event is, the bullying, the nasty person, whatever it is, I don't know, maybe a parent who's a gambler and can't change or something destructive in their lives. If you can't change that environmental problem, what can you do to kind of at least put a buffer in?
Yeah, this is why I love working with adolescents because they're at a great place in their life where if they get the message from us that this is a short period in your life and you're going to be independent one day and you're going to have the autonomy to make things different for you because making a suicidal attempt is being in charge. They feel like they can do something to change it. We want to say, yeah, you could do something to change it. We're going to give you a future. We're going to give you some different methods to get you through this short period of time. And guess what? When you get older, you're going to be able to change things and make life different for yourself. And that you don't have to be in. If it's an environmental thing, you can have that opportunity to change. And I have worked with young people that have come from very stressed environments where they have suffered where the families have suffered tremendous loss. And I have seen tremendous progress for them because they get that, oh, I can make a difference for myself. And all the way to the other where they feel like with I'm not going to get into the school I wanted to get into, so now my life is not going to be what I want it to be. Well, you can make it be what you want it to be. So now they're in control. That's how we'll work with them in the treatment. And what Elissa said, sometimes we need the medication to help. Our doctors are excellent in that because you want to give them that inner strength, that, the biological piece, especially if there's a history of psychiatric impairment. I mean, I don't want to take that lightly. That we take very seriously, and we want to move in with medication if needed.
Okay. This is Richard Solomon. The show is Taking Care of Business. I am joined by the true experts here at North Shore Child and Family Guidance Center right here in Roslyn and some other locations. The Long Island Crisis Center phone number is 516-679-1111. And if you're driving and you can't take it down, just send us an email. We'll get you the information. You could also go on the internet and just look up the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, 1-800-273-8255. I am joined in the studio with Elissa Smilowitz and Regina Barros-Rivera. I am so appreciative that they're here sharing their stories and their insights because this is such a big problem. When we come out of the break, because we have to take a quick break in a second, do you ever use like people who tried to commit suicide as a youth and they're now successful, and you try to bring them in as examples to children saying, here's someone, Joe, and he had a very bad upbringing, parents, people got killed in 9/11, this, that, and the other thing. He was all depressed, and we helped him. And look at him today. He's, whatever. Do you ever do anything like that in 45 seconds, and then we'll pick it up at the other end?
Well, in the triage groups with the adolescent, we have adolescents that are starting and we have adolescents that are almost completing. So the adolescents that are going in see the difference when they're in treatment. They see the other adolescents who are able to offer them suggestions that worked for them, and they're able to hear it because it's coming from a peer. It's coming from them.
All right, great. All right, Richard Solomon, Taking Care of Business. We'll be right back. This is a really important show. Feel free to share it with other people out there. There's a lot of people who need help. 516-679-1111 is the Long Island Crisis Center hotline phone number. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Anastasia Zeltos from Athens, Greece, and we listen to Richard Solomon on our computers, and we love it.
Richard Solomon, Taking Care of Business. Today's show, we're trying to help youth prevention of youth suicide. A tough topic, but an important topic. Again, the Long Island Crisis Center's phone number, 516-679-1111, and the national number is 1-800-273-8255. If you're driving and you can't access the internet, or you want, just send us an email or call us at the station. We'll get you those phone numbers. With me is Elissa Smilowitz and Regina Barros-Rivera. Now, I only mention your Roslyn Center for North Shore Child and Family Guidance Center, but you're in more than one place and you have more than one program. So why don't you share a little bit about what the overall structure of your enterprise is? Okay.
So we're the leading children's agency on Long Island. We service all of Long Island, and we have 3 sites. One, the right from the start, is our 0 to 10 center, specializing in children and maternal depression. Our Roslyn and Westbury site, we have outpatient mental health, and we service all ages. And then in our Westbury office, we also have a specialized program for adolescents and substance abuse. And our agency phone number is 516-626-1971. You can call if you have an emergency or that you want clinical services. We can answer that phone call and get you settled for clinical services as needed or refer you for emergency.
Do you have a website? Their website?
www.northshorechildguidance.org.
Okay.
is the website.
All right, so good. So phone calls, web, it's all there.
Yes.
All right. So before we kind of go back into the meat of all this, how did you guys become the experts in this field, and why did this gravitate to you? Because it's got to be very intense to deal with people who are, sort of on the brink. I know that your job is to pull them off the brink and get them into a much better place, but it's got to be very stressful for you to see the angst in people. It's got to be tough on you.
It is. It can be very stressful. It's very important that our clinicians do self-care, take time, be able to walk away and have a life and enjoy their family. And I stress that with my clinicians. I started, this was my second career, but I started in the Intensive Support Program, which is a collaborative between North Shore Child Guidance and BOCES. And I was in the middle school as a psychiatric social worker. And what we do is we work with children who are at high risk, unable to stay in a mainstream setting. Some of them have been hospitalized. Some of them are school refusal, suicide ideation, and it offers the child a smaller class size, which is the BOCES piece, but we offer the mental health piece in the school. There's 3 schools. There's the elementary, there's the middle school, and the high school. And I was in that position for over 5 years. And then I ended up being the coordinator of the high school ISP program. And from there, I was there for 5 or 6 years. And then Regina told me that she wanted me in the Roslyn office to start the triage program, which was something new. And it was exciting to me because I'm a strong believer in therapy and mental health. And I wanted to have a program to help these adolescents because, I've seen the struggles, and that's how I got started in this program.
And it's because you started by saying, is there an increase? Our agency develops programs based on need. And what we started seeing, a good, I would say 10 years at least, a big influx of kids wanting to kill themselves. And so as an agency, we said, well, how do we need to address it? So if you ask me, how did I come in? I'm in charge. I've been at the agency 29 years, but at that point, I was the director of of clinical services, and then I later moved to the position I'm in now. But I'm in a place at the agency where we hear all the cases that come in, and we have to develop a program. And we said we have to be able to move in quickly on these calls. There cannot be a waiting list. We need to diagnose on that call and get them in. If we can't see them, they need to go to an emergency room. We'll move it from that phone call. But I'm not a big pusher for emergency rooms either. If we could come in and help you, come into our agency, we'll do an assessment, and then we'll decide how we could best help you. So, my calling came from being a clinical social worker and saying we need to do something and developing a program.
Not to take away from emergency rooms, but I have a feeling that they don't really have the tools. I don't think they have the tools at the time. I think, they're looking at heart attacks, gunshot wounds, and things that they kind of know in their realm, and this is more of something that you need more specialized. To what extent does nutrition play in your treatment plans? Because if you notice, the American diet, is not really the healthiest, and that can certainly do things on a chemical level that doesn't, too much processed foods, too much processed type sugars. I'm sure that can sort of, if you don't feel good on a physical level, you probably won't feel well on an emotional level. And you look, just around what children tend to eat. They eat a lot of, sugary carbs, fats, not enough plants. We've had some shows on, diet nutrition, and you see the connection between diet, nutrition, and lifestyle on how that can help you feel better and maybe reverse some kinds of disease. One of the shows that we did that was very popular was with Dr. Michael Greger, wrote a book called How Not to Die. He talks about, plant-based diet and things like that.
Right.
To what extent do you work with nutrition and nutritionists in your programs to guide children not only on a treatment level, but, food, water, exercise kind of thing?
Well, we do sometimes have the adolescent. They try to self-medicate by eating a lot of sugary items, gives them a high, and then we have children that or adolescents that restrict or they purge because they're trying to become that perfect model figure, which is unrealistic. So, if we find that the eating disorder, we try to figure out if it's a true eating disorder. And if it is, we'll work in collaboration with an eating disorder clinic. We'll encourage the parents to look for a nutritionist to talk about food and how it impacts mood and how it impacts the child's coping ability. I tell the adolescent, what happens when you don't put gas in a car? It
runs out of
stops.
gas.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's my analogy to the kids. I say, well, you're not eating, you're not feeding yourself. So how do you expect to do well in school or get up in the morning and be able to be alert if you're not feeding the body? So it's definitely an ongoing practice that we do and something that is ongoing.
To what extent, and I guess this is more for Regina, the rise in cell phones and the internet and certain kinds of media, because when you say that starting 10 years ago, that's when people started really getting the smarter phones as opposed to just a phone. It was more like, the things we can access more of the internet and websites and things like that. And cell phones became cheap enough. And I noticed that, children and younger people were starting to carry cell phones with them all the time, which meant that they had access to the internet basically 24 hours a day, other than the times when they had to put it away in school. And even then, they probably even, keep it on or close by. They check it in between classes. So to what extent does the internet, cell phone access contribute to the overall problem, especially with self-image?
Yeah, it's a critical problem that we're having in our society today. Children at a young age have to learn to connect. They need to learn how to make a relationship. They need to learn to talk. And by having a feeling and then immediately jumping to their phone cuts out that ability to learn how to process and make a connection. So we're not seeing children play in the same way we did before. We're not seeing parents talk to their children. If you watch and you go out, you see parents take their children out, watch what they look like at a restaurant. They have their phones out and they're looking at their phone instead of talking to their children. So this started young, and so now we have adolescents behaving the same way. You have them not talking to each other, not connecting to each other. If they have a bad feeling, they may go onto Google it, or go on the internet, get onto a negative site. There's some very bad sites out there that just promote negative thinking, negative impulsivity. It really helps if they're obsessing or what we call ruminating, and they get that cell phone, you've got fire. To me, it's like a gun. So the parents may not realize that, but they have access to that 24/7. So what we're saying today very firmly is have zone-free internet in your home. Take down the phone. You know what, parent? You too.
Kill the Wi-Fi.
You too. You
Absolutely.
too.
Right.
Put it down.
I
Talk
agree.
to your child. Have a time in your family, if it's not during dinner time, but another time. Talk to your child. Have them talk to each other. Play. Remember the play, your boards, your
Friday night, you're supposed to play Monopoly, Trouble,
do something.
Twister.
Laugh together, play together, take a walk together, put the phones away. And what happens is when we have an adolescent, their complete ties are to that phone, and the parent punishes them with that. That's terrible. They go into their phone, into their room, lock the door. That's when they could really do something. I don't tell the parent, take that phone away now. You have to create a process, because if that phone is now their lifeline, take it away because you punished them, you created a problem. So I look at everything, but those cell phones, that internet, the young people will differ with me. I take them on trips. We have trips we do. I have the Latina Girl Program, which is a little different, but it's also for young Latina girls. High rate of suicide among Latina girls.
Why?
They have the additional clash of cultures. So when they have a fight with their parents, it is in addition to all of what we've been talking about here. add to that the cultural difference. And then the parents really don't understand how we process here, and these kids are in a different culture, so their fights could be very extreme. So when I talk about wanting to kill themselves, they go in, they want to die, they will withdraw, and they want to die, and they really do take big risks. So in that program, and now we've started it with our triage, is in addition to all the clinical, I work with the parents and especially mothers and daughters. That's an important bond. I have a big thing with that in that program. But it's taking them on a trip. And I tell them, put away your phones. Once a month, we take them and we have an outing and we have fun. And we pick, where do you want to go? And I take adolescents between the age of 12 and 18. Pick a place you want to go. We're going to have fun. And I don't want those phones out. And they have fun. It is hard to have fun. It's like teaching them to have fun again.
You know, the phones are almost ubiquitous now. I kind of get like, you know, you take the Long Island Railroad and, okay, so none of these people really know each other. So they just sitting there, maybe they're catching up on work email, but a lot of times I see people playing solitaire and all this other stuff. Yeah. But, you know, in the old days, you would read a newspaper or whatever, but that's kind of gone. But you see literally on the train, every person's buried in their cell phone, maybe a couple of people listening to music or something like that, but for the most part, I see, you know, the index finger going pop, 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 and they're texting and Facebooking and this and that. And then what seems to happen is, like, I've gone to, like, say, I've been to either meetings or parties, you know, okay, I want to be kind of generic. So let's say I've been at meetings, and everybody at the meeting is not paying attention. They're all buried in their phone doing something else, and you're wondering, well, why, you know, why? No one's actually focused on the speaker. And that's becoming more and more prevalent. Mm-hmm. And I've been at children's parties where I will see all of the parents sort of in the corner, all texting or on the phone or doing whatever they're doing, not interacting with each other as their children are like sort of running around at the birthday party. Right. And 30 years ago, I don't want to sound like a fuddy-duddy here, but 30 years ago, you never saw that. Right. And now it's like if you don't have the phone, you look out of place.
Right.
That's true. You know, one of the things that we talk with the family is that there is no good texting or conversations 4 o'clock in the morning with adolescents. So, you know, we talk when a child is coming in and they're having all these at-risk behaviors, we definitely inform the parents. We try to work with the child and getting them to disconnect from it by like 10 or 11 o'clock so they can actually sleep at night. Because that impacts mood. You know, if they're on until 3 or 4 in the morning and then they have to get up for school, how are they going to cope? So, you know, it's almost close to an addiction sometimes. Now,
and if I could just add, in our agency, one of the interventions or one of the modalities that we do for the adolescents, for children and adolescents, is group work. We have a lot of groups, different kinds of groups, talk groups, activity groups, groups that encourage the connection between the peers so that they get that from us. So we have the parents in groups, we have the children in groups, and then family sessions, the parents talking, learning to talk with their youth. One of the goals of getting better is being able to reach out to your parent and say, I feel sad, and now withdraw into the room and have the parents say, okay, what do you need from me? Can I hear you? Talk to me. Or let's take this to the therapist. But graduating from treatment or finishing from treatment is that they could do that on their own. And we have kids process in family sessions and in groups when I'll have multiple family groups, parents and other families together. And when a family is ending, I'm saying, tell me 2 or 3 things you think you learned, what made it feel better for you. And the adolescent will smile and say, my mother learned to listen. How great is that? And the mother says, I learned to listen. And then the child will say, I learned not to withdraw into my room, but to come out and say, I'm not feeling good. Or the parent will say, now I know when she's not feeling right, I can ask her, and it's okay if she doesn't want to talk, but at least there's that connection. And I go back to connections and learning how to make the connections and learning from parents learning to read their children being trusting of the parent. Because even though adolescents want to push away and say, I want to be me, I don't want you, I don't need you, my friends are the most important in my life. Yeah, for today they are. But the parents are critical. And so we work with them to help them
Yes,
say,
we do.
yeah, you stay in their life and we'll help you do that. And they'll come back, but they need you. And they need you to be there. They need you to be concerned and worried. And even if they feel like they hate you. I mean, the kids feel like they hate a lot of them at that age. But
That's true.
It's okay. Let them. It's only a feeling. Feelings change. That's what the adolescents have to learn. Feelings change. They love that. They'll go, what got better for you? I learned feelings change. That's right. 1 minute I want to die. The next minute I love my life. That's right. You love your life today. Then 2 minutes later you may not. It's okay for today. And it's okay to accept that you're going to have these mood swings, too. I think with kids that have more serious psychiatric impairment, like the bipolar, that's an illness, and they have to learn to live with it. And we have, specialized way of helping them as well. So if anyone's listening that you know that that's in your family, there's a particular way to work with that as well.
All right. Richard Solomon, I am with the very great experts at North Shore Child and Family Guidance Center, and we'll be right back after this quick break. But again, the phone number is 516-679-1111. The Long Island Crisis Center, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 800-273-8255. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Roy Cosgrove, and you're listening to Rich Solomon on WCWP 88.1 FM.
Richard Solomon, welcome you back. I have Elissa Smilowitz and Regina Barros-Rivera with me from North Shore Child and Family Guidance Center. What is the phone number for your center? And because I don't want you guys to be excluded from the conversation.
Okay, North Shore Child and Family Guidance Center. Our phone number is 516-626-1971. If you need an appointment with us, call that number and press 0 for operator or follow the prompts, and they will get you to an intake worker, and you will get an appointment. I promise. We really plan really hard to make that happen.
All right, before we get into some other quick topics, because this show is flying by, conflict negotiation. That doesn't seem to be a skill that is easily acquired or learned. How to deal with bullying, de-escalation, avoiding the risk of conflict, such as, borrowing money, starting drugs, all these things that lead you into a path that becomes much worse. How do you deal with the negotiation or navigation of conflict? Fighting with people, angry bosses or coworkers, or the silent treatment at a school or bullying. How do you teach people to navigate through that? Because all of us, there's traffic out there, there's frustration, there's high taxes, a lot of things just feel broken out there. How do you get people to navigate that?
Well, one of the things in the adolescent groups and in the parent groups is we teach communication skills. We teach them how to navigate the world more appropriately, recognizing when they're angry and frustrated. What do we do with that? How do we handle it? In walking away, counting to 10, verbalizing in an appropriate way when you're angry. Parents learning how to communicate better with each other and also with the child in regards to a teaching moment, because what we try to tell the parents is that your child is absorbing the way you interact with each other as a family. So if you and your spouse are yelling and screaming at each other, that's what your child is learning. If you're able to talk and negotiate, your child is learning that too. So we do a lot of parent groups, and we talk about that. We talk about how difficult situations could be a teaching moment for your adolescent or your child, and learning how to navigate that with your child. And with the adolescent, verbalizing their frustration instead of acting out, we try to get them to do that in the groups, and also learning how to navigate. How do we get our needs met in an appropriate way? So it's a learning technique.
Do you show pictures or film of like Frank Costanza and George Costanza sort of yelling at each other, being dysfunctional and going, okay, this is not what to do?
Yeah. Well, sometimes what the adolescents will do is they'll bring up scenarios in group, and then the clinician will say, okay, so how can we handle that differently? What can we do differently in regards to that? What can we say to get our needs met so that our parents hear us? That's really important. To get them to understand that.
So,
Yeah, and also, with adolescents, you want to do it in vivo. So if they're in a group and they're having conflict, you resolve the conflict in person, in live. When I go on trips, they're interacting with each other. So I know what their behaviors are. I know what their problems are. If you have a kid that's in that group and they present as if they're the victim, but then you see them behaving in a way that's bringing on that relating with others like that, you can gently point that out either in the individual or right there in the present. So they have to learn how to change their behaviors. So that's really how they develop an awareness. And we teach other coping skills like mindfulness and meditation, how to listen to music that's going to be soothing and not aggravate them. If you ask what kind of music do you listen to, we don't want them to listen to the music. This is my favorite. And then, they're listening to something that's kind of promoting aggression and death. And we will say, can we think about some other music that might be?
Change that?
What else might you like? Because someone else in the group might have something that they think is better. So that.
Okay. So the show is just flying by. So just to move things along, because I want to really pack it, like 3 hours worth of radio into about 58 minutes. There were certain triggers and traumas and stressors that you wanted to address.
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
Okay.
Now, not to cut you off, but there's so many important topics. I mean, it's unbelievable how multidisciplinary you need to be just to deal with sort of one set of issues.
That's right.
It's communication, listening, talking, anger management, conflict negotiation, family dynamics, dysfunctionality.
That's right. That's right. When we do an assessment, we're looking at all of that. So a good diagnostic assessment takes in what is going on in the moment. So we specialize in working with young people when there's been trauma. Now, trauma is a little different than a child that maybe have a long history of psychiatric problems. It may be a child that witnessed the violence. They may have witnessed the death of someone, or like all of us witnessed 9/11, right? So we're all victims of a horrible, traumatic event in society. So we have different coping skills, and all of us dealt differently. So people who are listening might know, I remember that day and I know how I felt. So an adolescent who doesn't have good coping skills, if they witness someone or if they've been a victim of trauma, rape, date rape, the sexual abuse. I have a lot of young people coming in who have been sexually abused at a young age and never disclosed it, and then suddenly it's disclosed. Or they come in symptomatic and it doesn't come out for a good year in treatment, and then we're like, okay, now I understand. They were keeping the secret. They weren't sharing it with anyone. They were traumatized. They were injured, and they were trying to cope, and they were trying to internally figure out what to do with this. And one of their options in their mind may have been, I need to die. I need to get rid of this. I was part of it, or I was abused. I can't live like this, and they want to go. So we want to do that. I know, Elissa, if you have other traumatic incidents for car accidents.
It could be car accidents, also the traumatic situations that occur between getting jumped by a group of other adolescents. I mean, they come in, they're having flashbacks, they're thinking about it, they have all these negative thoughts, and it impacts them and their ability to self-regulate. And then they go into the darker piece, which is, I can't tolerate this anymore, I want to escape it, and so I want to die. So, getting them to able to talk about the trauma and be able to come to some kind of terms of letting go or learning coping skills to decrease it, sometimes psychiatric, it depends on the significance of the trauma, to help them with that.
Well, is there really kind of two traumas, which is sort of past trauma and ongoing trauma?
Yes, that's right. They call it the big T, little t, I think, what we learned. It's one big thing that happens. You work on it, you can process it, and you kind of process it differently. Then there's the more chronic trauma, where you grew up around physical abuse, physical violence, witnessing violence, and it's chronic, and it's adding to, it's an injury. There's an injury to the brain, to the body, to the person, and that child may have been going through that for years. Then they're an adolescent, the hormones are changing. One thing happens, like they're mistreated, or they have a boyfriend, and the boyfriend breaks up with them, then it feels like it's something horrific, but that's really an expression of the chronic trauma that they've been experiencing.
Mm-hmm. And, it's something that happens, especially when they have that history of trauma. It actually does change connections in the brain. I mean, the research has shown that, and that they think differently. So, one of the things is getting them to learn how to self-regulate. That's very key.
When you use the word self-regulate, what does that mean, and how do you do that, as the self-regulator?
Right. Well, one of the things that we teach adolescents to do is to be able to be more mindful. That's where the mindfulness comes in, to where they're at, how they're feeling, and accept it. And learn coping skills to get them past it. Okay, I'm angry right now. What can I do to help myself? Maybe I'll redirect my thoughts. Maybe I'll count to 10. Maybe I'll just do some deep breathing. Instead of avoiding the emotion, and when you avoid, it builds. It's like a balloon, If you keep stuffing your emotions, it's like stuffing air in a balloon. What happens? And this is an analogy I use with the kids. What happens when you put too much air in a balloon? It pops. So if you keep stuffing your emotions down, 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 that's what happens. So we try to teach them to be more cognizant of where they're at, recognizing where their emotions are. It's almost like teaching them to be their own therapist, Do
you teach people, well, let me rephrase this. People deal with that by either bottling it up, compartmentalizing it, or avoiding it. It's basically what I see, just as an attorney people deal with legal problems, because that's what they kind of do. They either just ignore it, or they somehow compartmentalize it, or whatever, but not necessarily deal with it. What do you actually do to teach it? Because I can imagine that bottling anything up eats you out inside. It has to.
Right.
Because you also probably feel very alone in the process.
Right. So there's different ways to work with, there's cognitive behavioral therapies, there's insight-oriented therapy, there's more family-focused therapy. But in all of the therapies, what you're doing is helping the person to deal with the emotion. So building the frustration tolerance, being able to sit with the feeling and not act on the feeling. You do this work with addictions as well. If you have a feeling, you don't want it to go away. You want to keep it. So supposing you have that feeling, you learn how to stay with it. You learn how to talk about it, or you learn how to change your thoughts about it. If you think that A, B, C equals D, you learn differently. So you change the thoughts so that you don't have to feel that way, and you get a new feeling. So all of that, it gets put into the work with the particular person. Behavior therapy works better with some than insight-oriented. So it depends on the person and their ability.
To what extent does instant gratification and impatience play into this whole problem of suicide? Because, with cell phones and the internet, first of all, a long time ago, there was something called the busy signal. You actually had to make a phone call, and if the person didn't actually answer the phone, you actually had to wait.
Right.
Now what they do is they'll call you, then there's call waiting. If you don't pick up on the call waiting, they'll call your cell phone. If it goes into your voicemail, they'll run and knock on your door. I mean, we live in a world now where you get on the internet and the package is delivered the next day. You can listen to any music you want. You're not necessarily forced to listen to any particular radio show or this or that. A long time ago, there was, channel 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, and 21, 25 or whatever. And that was TV. That was it. And at midnight or whatever, they had the test pattern and they went off the air, and there was no TV. There was no DVR. You just had to wait.
Right.
So a long time ago, if the supermarket or the bank was closed, tough. If you couldn't get in touch with someone, you had to wait. Now, you don't wait for anything. The only thing that you have to wait for is all the traffic jams to clear up. Yeah. How do you teach people who have frustration, intolerance, and impatience when they're at risk for suicide to be more patient? Because I can only imagine that rattles them more. if they're impatient and highly frustrated.
That's right. That is truly the work to put the thought before the action. So there, with adolescents who tend to be more impulsive anyway, and then you have a child where it's gearing up that way, they're at a very high risk. So you want to really teach them to not be impulsive, to put thought before action, to really learn to talk it out, to build the frustration tolerance. It comes with the treatment, in treatment.
But how do you teach? I guess I need the soundbite, sadly. How do you teach patience to people? How do you teach, younger people that the world is not about, I want it, you get it. And if I just whine or complain, I'll get it despite, objections or whatever.
Well, it comes to, that's the work with the family, with the parent and the child, and learning how to sit with the discomfort. Learning that it's uncomfortable. Yes, you want immediate reaction or you want immediate results, and that doesn't always happen. And that's a teaching moment. That's something that, when we do the groups, all the adolescents have to put their phones away. We talk to the adolescents about disconnecting for like an hour in the evening. It's a practice skill. They have to practice to be able to learn how to handle that. But yes, you're right. It's definitely something that has become an issue in this environment.
In our society.
Yeah.
And it is the responsibility of the adults in our society to help make that happen. Because it's not just the family, it's got to be the schools, it has to be the community. It's all of us to really model a different way of relating. It's our society that's become this way.
Well, is one of the problems also that our society is sort of breaking down? Mm-hmm. We don't really have neighborhoods like we used to. There used to be, you used to walk around and every person in the neighborhood knew, if you were a kid, they kind of knew that you were from the neighborhood, and you went to maybe this school that right down the street or that school or whatever. People maybe attended more religious institutions. They went on picnics on Sundays or things like that. And now sort of everybody is, I guess with the emphasis on individuality, we became very lonely as a society, because now we're just all being ourselves as opposed to being a part of anything. And one of the things that's interesting about being part of a radio station, for example, is like have like a radio station, family. Mm-hmm. There's, the guy that does the Dylan show. There's my friend Jay who does, the DFK show. There's Grandfather Rock, and there's Alana. And, I know all the people, and we're like, we come and go. We all say hello and this and that. We're all connected by radio. And I noticed that for a lot of people out there, they don't have anything to anchor them like that.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think Long Island is a very isolating place. When families moved out to Long Island, they became isolated and they lost that community place to be. So you got put into these little neighborhoods, and you have to arrange play dates, and then the parents are working so hard and long hours. So who's arranging the play dates? The kids arrange their, internet dates, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's true. We try to encourage the children, especially if they're at risk, to either find an activity outside of school where they're actually socializing. Either, we have the wilderness program at North Shore Child and Family Guidance, but we also encourage, and we have the respite programs, but we also encourage if they have a sport that they enjoy, or if there's an art class that they can enjoy, or drama classes, we try to encourage that.
All right, great. It's all the time we have. So my special thanks to Elissa and Regina. Thank you so much. Thank you for the work that you do. And hopefully, if anybody out there is listening and needs help, please reach out for help. Please get help. If you know someone at risk, get them help. Don't ignore the warning signs. This show will be podcasted and YouTubed, and everything else will be out there on social media. North Shore Child and Family Guidance Center. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
My name is Regina Barros-Rivera. I am the Associate Executive Director of North Shore Child and Family Guidance Center. If you're a family or if you're a youth and you're feeling that you're sad, you're depressed, and you need help, please call us at 516-626-1971. We are here to help you.